Tonight we're doing Parshas Noach. The truth of the matter is that Bereshis and Noach are hard to overview, to lecture on. I'm going to tell you why, and I want to share with you. I want to tell you a rule about Tanakh, about Torah b'chal Tanakh b'frat. We believe, and it's true. You said it in the Bar Mitzvah, my man, that Alpayim Shana Kodma Torah. The Torah comes before the world. Before the Eibishter created the world, the Eibishter's wisdom already existed. And then that wisdom of Hashem, which precedes the world, somehow comes down into the world as we have it with the Torah and mitzvahs that we practice. Now, the idea that the Torah predates the world is b'chlal hard to understand. It's particularly hard to understand when it comes to history. The stories of the Torah, the stories of people, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yankiv, Adam, Noach, Sheis, Chanoich. Individual people lived at a particular time, in a particular place. How is their story, how is their life, Kadma L'Yolam, before the world? And on a Hasidic level, there are very profound answers. Basically, these physical people are playing out spiritual ideas that come before them, or something to that effect. But on a practical level, here's what I want to, this is my opening thought on this Pasha. It's not really on this Pasha, it's on the Chumash Bechlau, and on Bereshis and Noach. And on Bereshis and Noach in particular. And that thought is this. The Torah is God's wisdom. But the way the Torah comes into the world, it's connected to individual people and to certain times and places. In other words, the Chumash, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Moshe Rabbeinu, are the wisdom of Hashem. They come from before the world, all those fancy exotic ideas. But the way the Torah is written to us as we read it, the Chumash is the book of Moshe, it's the book of Moses. The whole Chamisha Chumshei Torah is called Torah's Moshe. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu was not born till Parshas Shmois and Sefer Shmois, the whole Chamisha Chumshei Torah are designed to revolve around the personality of Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, the entire Bereshis, Adam and Noach and Avraham and Sarah and Yitzchak and Rivka, Yankov and Leah and Rachel, and the 12 Shvatim and Golos Mitzrayim, they're all setting up the birth and the life and the contribution of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's how the Chumash is designed. In other words, Hashem takes something which is higher than the world and brings it down into time and space to revolve around one man. And you should know the same is true of other Sfarim in Tanakh. For example, there's a sefer called Divrei Hayomim, Chronicles. Divrei Hayomim is 2 sections. Divrei Hayomim Aleph and Divrei Hayomim Beis. Divrei Hayomim starts with Adam Rishon. It goes until the Chorban of the first Beis HaMikdash. But it's understood that Divrei Hayomim is the story of the family of David, of King David, of the Davidic family. It starts before and it ends after, but everything is supporting that thrust, that direction, that end. And like I said before, there are many Sfarim in Tanakh that have this definition or this containment. Even though they're Torah, they come before the world, and there's so many different layers and levels and interpretations and depths. The way it plays itself out in reality, it revolves around the person. The entire Chamisha Chumshei Torah revolves around Moshe Rabbeinu, and there are other Sfarim in Tanakh that revolve around other personalities as well. So when you read the beginning of the Chumash, you read Bereshis and Noach, if you accept the supposition that I presented, that the entire Chamisha Chumshei Torah is called Torah's Moshe, and that's a fact, I didn't make this up. The Chamisha Chumshei Torah are called the law, they're called Moshe Rabbeinu's Sfarim. Even though the entire Bereshis Moshe wasn't born, makes you question the entire Bereshis. How is Bereshis connected to Moshe Rabbeinu's life? And there is a real answer to the question. There's a real answer to the question, how Bereshis is connected to Moshe Rabbeinu's life. And I'll tell you how. I'll try to tell you how at least. Moshe Rabbeinu's role is to give Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu's role is to give Torah. The definition of Torah is bringing together heaven and earth. The definition of Torah is not destroying earth. It's not overwhelming the earth with heaven, with godliness. The definition of Torah is bringing together heaven and earth. To use a mystical form, which I think you can relate to, the definition of Torah is oiris in kelim, light in vessels. Torah came into the world so that the world should be able to hold God. Not the world should be destroyed by God or overwhelmed by God or should hide God. World and God should converge, confuse, should come together. And of course you've learned about this in so many Maimonim and so many Siches that talk about mitzvahs. Why are mitzvahs so important? Why are physical mitzvahs so important? Because the design of Yiddishkeit is to bring heaven and earth together. Or to say it in psychological terms, to say it in more human terms, Torah, believe it or not, Torah is about normal. The Eibishter did not create the Torah for the purpose of extremism. Faket, the Eibishter created the Torah for the purposes of blending, of balance, of integrating. A frum Jew is not supposed to be a person who jumps off buildings. A frum Jew is not supposed to be a person who suffers. A frum Jew's whole idea is to be religious and normal. That combination of living in the world and being frum is the entire design of Yiddishkeit. The entire design of Yiddishkeit is that you should have a job, you should go to work, you should live amongst people, you should assimilate in a way, of course, which is consistent with Torah, even with your goyish neighbors, and be a Yid. That's the whole concept. Torah and mitzvahs is about balance, about not too much heaven, not too little earth. There should be exactly balanced. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's entire role. Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah. The concept of Torah is joining heaven and earth. That the heaven shouldn't destroy the earth shouldn't conceal over the heaven. The two should merge, the two should fuse. And again, I'm repeating myself. The way this plays itself out practically, Yiddishkeit wants us to be Jewish in the world, Jewish and normal. That's what Matan Torah is. The story of Bereishis is setting that up. In other words, once you understand what I just said, point number one, the entire Chumash from Bereishis until Zeis HaBracha is Moshe Rabbeinu's Sefer. Number two, what's Moshe Rabbeinu's whole Indian? Torah. Number three, what's Torah? Joining together heaven and earth. The entire Sefer Bereishis is telling the story of how we got to that point. There was a great tzaddik, whose name some of you for sure have heard, who was named Menachem Mendel of Kotsk. Yeah, what was his family name? Does anybody know what was his family name? Anybody know the family name of the Kotzker Rebbe? Morgenstein. Menachem Mendel of Kotsk was a very great tzaddik, and he was a Meshugana Ovid. His avodas Hashem was extreme. He served Hashem till the last drop of blood. His every breath was serving Hashem to a point of Mesiras Nefesh. Reb Mendel Kotzker had a following of Talmidim, Chassidim, and they were as crazy as he was. If you know anything about the history of Kotsk, you know this. A regular person, like you or me, would show up in Kotsk, in 48 hours would have a nervous breakdown. The stress, the whole thing was such an extreme world. The stress, the bittul hayesh, they destroyed your ego completely, and they destroyed their own egos. The whole culture was a radical, extreme type of Chassidus. To be a Kotzker, you had to be yourself a tzaddik. The Mendel Kotzker had a following of tzaddikim who took this extreme derech and applied it to their lives. When he passed away, and even during his lifetime, I don't know if you know the history of Kotzker, it's a very controversial story. He locked himself in a room for the last 20 years of his life. His Talmidim took his inspiration, but they were not as crazy as he. They were much more normal. So they were able to be rebbes over regular people, like the first Gerer Rebbe was the Talmud of the Kotzker, as were many other famous Hasidic Rebbes. The Kotzker himself was a radical, was an extremist. So I heard, him and the Tzemach Tzedek were contemporaries. They were born the same time, they passed away the same time. The Tzemach Tzedek said about the Mendel Kotzker, is a seder from Far Matan Torah. This Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, whose avodas Hashem, he was really an oived. He was a servant of Hashem till the last drop of blood. It was an extreme avoid. It was not for regular people. A regular person could not possibly do it. So the Tzemach Tzedek categorized what Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk was doing as serving God the way people did before Har Sinai, before Matan Torah. This Vart helps you understand what Bereishis is about. Certainly the two first parshas, Bereishis and Noach. What's the story of Bereishis Noach? Until Avraham Avinu was born. In Mitzvah Hashem next week, with Hashem's help, we'll talk about Avraham Avinu. But for right now, Bereishis and Noach. What's the story of Bereishis and Noach? Bereishis and Noach is the story of a world where everything was gigantic. Everything was gigantic, giant, massive. Beginning with longevity. People lived almost 1,000 years. You can go out of your mind. Live 1,000 years, you can be sugar-bedded. How long can a person live? You know, how many divers can you? 1,000 years. They lived very, very long lives. They were gigantic in every way. They were physically very strong. They were intellectually very, very, very brilliant. They understood things that we don't understand. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. We do archaeology now. And we find civilizations from 4,000 years ago, 4,500 years ago, that had dentistry that we still don't have. They had certain technology. They didn't have any machines, didn't have electricity, but they were very smart. And you can find this in the archaeology that people are finding in Egypt and in other places. They had knowledge that we don't have. And most importantly, they understood the stars. They understood astronomy, they understood astrology. They somehow understood what's going on in the sky, as so to speak, as a message from God. They were very smart people. Everything about them was gigantic. Gigantic. The consequence of this was that if you lived in the first 26 generations, for the Kabbalists in the room, and of course you're all great Mekubalim, so you know this, it says in Pirkei Avos, in the beginning of Pei Kamo erech apayim lefonav. Right, the 10 generations did Avedis, then the Mabul came and destroyed the world. 10 generations did Avedis, Avraham Avinu came and took all of their schar. But the expression in the Mishnah is, for those who remember Pirkei Avos, Kamo erech apayim lefonav, how much arichos af, that Hashem prolonged his anger until Noach, it says twice. Kamo erech apayim lefonav between Adam and Noach, Kama erech apayim lefana between Noach and Avram. You know how Chassidus translates these words, Kama erech apayim? That they lived from Arich Anpin. You know what Arich Anpin is? Arich Anpin is Kesed. When we talk about Klippa, Klippa can live from two sources. Klippa can live from the bottom of the heap. Klippa can live from what's called Ribitz and Tzumim, from the junk, from what's left over from Kedusha. And Klippa can live from higher than Ishtal Shalus, which is called Kachashei HaKoide, darkness and light are the same. In the level of infinity, good isn't good, bad isn't good, it's all, who cares? And there is a concept of Klippa living, not from the bottom of the pile, but from Makif Elyon, from Kesed. That's how we understood those 26 generations. When Hashem created the world, until Matan Torah, 26 generations, Moshe is the 27th generation. And as you know, every Shabbos, before Baruch Shomar, we say, there are 26 Kili Olam Chastes, so the Chazal say, on that capital, I think it's Kuf Lamed Vav, Psalm 136, in Tilim, Hani Chov Vav Kili Olam Chastes Keneged Mi, the 26 Kili Olam Chastes that we say every Shabbos, before Haderes Vehamuna, correspond to whom? And the Gemara answers, Keneged Chavav Deides Shahayu Nizoinim Echazdish Ala Kadosh Baruch Hu. When Hashem created the world, Hashem just gave man everything for free. The world was incredibly fertile. That means things grew in an incredibly tasty and large and healthy way. The people were physically strong, were intellectually brilliant, lived very long lives. I always tell people, you know, the historians are trying to understand why it took people so long to discover paper. There's very little record of the ancient world because they didn't write on paper. They wrote on papyrus, which is a plant, until they figured out how to use papyrus. Before that, they used tablets. They used to write on the walls of caves and the walls of the graves in Egypt and so on and so forth. Why didn't people learn how to write earlier? And there's many answers to the question. One of them is that people say that written language is very recent, but there's a simple answer. If you never forget anything, you have no reason to write things down. If your memory is perfect, you have no reason to write things down. Now I want you to think about this from a scientific point of view. Every memory that you ever took into your brain is there forever. Nothing that goes into your brain goes away. Your brain holds a record of everything you ever saw, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. You can't recall it. You can't get it back. people with better memories, it doesn't mean they remember better. They're able to access their memory. You go back 4,000 years, 5,000 years, people remembered everything they saw and heard, every conversation they had. They didn't need paper because their memories were incredibly powerful. They were great minds. They lived very long lives. They were very physically strong. Everything was on a gigantic scale. Now, what happened? How did people live in reality? The answer is one of two ways. If they were tzaddikim, they were like the Kotzker Rebbe, Til Mesidus Nefesh, radicals, extremists. If they were the Shoyim, they put the biggest of the Shoyim we know to shame. If they were bad, they were evil. Everything about the pre-Matan Torah, pre-Avraham Avinu world everything was very, very large, and everything was very, very, very extreme. The good was very good, the bad was very bad. There was no balance in Eibishter's world. The world of Adam Rishon, the world of Sheis, of all the generations, of Noach, and even after the Mabul, was a world of people who lived extreme lives. If they were bad, they were terrible. If they were good, they were incredibly good. And of course, the story of Pashas Noach is the story of the flood. Hashem is erasing the world. Hashem is destroying his world. Why? He created these people. They were giants in every way. They were giants intellectually, they were giants emotionally, they were giants physically, they were giants in terms of health, they were giants in terms of longevity. They lived in a world where everything was gigantic, everything was perfect, and a wonderful, wonderful life. And they became the most evil people in the world. Right? What does Rashi say in the Chitas of Sunday? What's the code word to the Mabul? Chomos. Chomos. They were guilty of idolatry. They were guilty of adultery. They wished to look away. Chomos. Chomos means I took what you had. People stole from one another. There was a breakdown of law and order. People began to cheat and steal. And no one regarded another person's property. That was the final nail in the coffin for which the Eibishter brought the Mabul. The Mabul was Hashem destroying the world he created. He created an extreme world, gave man every opportunity, and man failed him. Man failed him. I want you to know, one of the most important discussions in the entire Chumash, or perhaps even the entire Tanakh, one of the most important discussions in the entire Tanakh is Shvi of last week. Hashem is having a conversation with himself. And then he says, the very end of Pashas Bereshis is a muse. It's a conversation between the Eibishter and himself. And let me tell you how the conversation goes. I'm going to obviously translate it into English, but there's a conversation that the Eibishter has with himself at the end of Bereshis. And basically the conversation goes like this. I created people. I gave them everything. I gave them longevity, I gave them health, I gave them wealth, I gave them strength, I gave them intelligence. I gave them everything a human being could need to be a human being. And they became worse than animals. So I'm taking it away. And I'm creating a whole new world. And this new world is going to be built on a very, very uncomfortable word. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to a word that you know, but contextually it's very, very uncomfortably. The Eibishter says, I am changing the condition of human beings from having all of these blessings, and I'm replacing it with a built-in, with an established, with an entrenched vulnerability. The Eibishter has a conversation with himself. Look at the end of Bereshis. And he says, you give a person everything in the world, he becomes a Rosha. So I'm going to make people worry. Worry about health, worry about longevity, worry about children, worry about safety, worry about food, and we'll see what happens. That's the story. The end of Bereshis. The Eibishter says, I gave man every opportunity. When you give people everything in the world, they stink it up. I'm going to make life difficult. I'm going to make life precarious. I'm going to make life scary. Not everybody knows if they're going to live 100 years. Not everybody knows if they're going to have a job. Not everybody knows they're going to get along with their wife. Not everybody knows if they're going to have children. Not everybody knows if the children are going to follow in their footsteps. The Eibishter introduces into the human condition fear, vulnerability, with the idea that if he introduces this fear, introduces this vulnerability, man will be a little bit less arrogant. And if man will be a little bit less arrogant, maybe man will actually turn to the heavens and think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the conversation that the Eibishter has with himself at the end of last week's Pasha, in Shvi of Pashas Bereshis. This is the conversation that Hashem has with himself. How does the Eibishter make this transition? How does the Eibishter interrupt what is, it's 1,500 years, 1,600 years of people living almost like super people, the Mabul. The pre-Mabul world was a world of incredible blessing, incredible success, and the Eibishter Mabuled it. You know what the meaning of a Mabul is? Guys, I want you to understand what the meaning of a Mabul is. It's very important to get this point across. Okay? The meaning of a Mabul is as follows. And I'm going to give you a short introduction. And again, if I had another half an hour, I would talk another half an hour. I technically have 2 more minutes. Okay? The Rebbe has a kasha in a sikha. A simple kasha. We're holding today Shlishi. Tomorrow's going to be Revi, right? One of the things we're going to learn about this week is the rainbow. What do we know about the rainbow? It says in Chumash that every time you see a rainbow, it means Hashem wants to destroy the world and He won't do it. Now, that is the most irrational thing to say, because there's always a rainbow. If you go to Greenland and Iceland, a place like that, they have rainbows all the time. Rainbows happen. Rainbows are not rare. Rainbows happen all over the world. If the Eibishter wants to destroy the world every time there's a rainbow, that means every second Hashem wants to destroy the world. It doesn't sound reasonable. So the Rebbe says that that's the pshat of a rainbow. Hashem wants to destroy the world. So the Rebbe came up with a simple but radical idea. Rabbi Yossi, a Mabul doesn't mean to destroy the whole world. A Mabul means to destroy even one little thing in this world. But to destroy it in such a way that it's not recycled. Recycled. The way the Eibishter made his world, if you guys know physics, there's a law of conservation. Nothing is ever created, nothing is ever destroyed. Everything simply cycles. There's a law of conservation. The entire universe has a fixed amount of matter. It just changes from energy to gas to liquid to solid. And it goes in a circle. It's never created and destroyed. Before the Mabul, there was a world. Hashem did not destroy that world and build the new world on the broken world. Hashem destroyed that world. That world is gone. Fini. And He made a new one. The chiddush of the Mabul is not that Hashem destroyed the whole world. The chiddush of the Mabul is that Hashem says, I'm destroying that world, and I'm not destroying it and then recycling the parts to make the new world. I'm destroying that world and it's gone, and I'm making a new one. So the Rebbe says in the Sikha, when you see a rainbow, it means Hashem wants to destroy something. It could be an insect. The meaning of a Mabul is kill and destroy without any regard for using the resources again. And when the Eibishter made the Keshes, Hashem swore that going forward after the Mabul, there is never destruction that's not recycled. Everything that dies becomes life for something else. Everything that breaks down becomes the foundation of the new generation, the new culture, the new world, the new civilization, and so on. The Mabul was different. The Mabul was Hashem destroying to absolutely cut and slash and burn, to destroy completely. What did the Eibishter destroy? That alle gute Sachen, going back 5,000 years. But they were evil. They were evil because they were so confident. They were so sure of themselves. Because their life was so good. They didn't turn to God. They destroyed that world in the Mabul. Created a new world. That's us. In our world, people don't live 1,000 years. People die, people get sick, people suffer, people have challenge. And the Eibishter's perspective is that maybe people are going to turn towards me. Let me just finish. Please give me 30 seconds more, please. Rabbi Yossi, please. All of this is the story of Matan Torah. How did I start my talk tonight? That the entire Chamisha Chumsha Torah is the story of Moshe Rabbeinu. The story of Moshe Rabbeinu is the story of Torah. What's the story of Torah? Serving God in the world, being normal. Bereishis and Noach are the first 2 steps of this story. Bereishis is the story of the super people, if you will. Gigantic human beings who had every opportunity and they completely abandoned anything that's good. Even ben adam lachavede, not just ben lamakeh. You don't like the Eibishter, you want to do an aveda, go ahead. But why are you stealing from your neighbor? Then after that you have a Mabul, Hashem destroys that world. Creates a new world. That after 10 generations is going to be an Avraham Avinu, which is going to set up people who are much smaller, not as smart, not as strong, not as secure, don't have the same kind of longevity, don't have the same kind of memories. But those people are going to figure out a way of bringing together heaven and earth, And the end of that story is Har Sinai. We'll continue this in Mitzvah Hashem next Tuesday.